How's it going, guys? So, welcome. Obviously, this is my summit suit that I wore on my climb up Mount Everest. If you've never worn one of these things, I want to let you know we got about 5 minutes before I am going to pass out. So, it's got this nice little hood here. And basically, I don't want you to think of this, though, as a summit suit today. I want you to think of this suit as post-traumatic stress disorder, okay? So we have veterans on campus here at Emory. We have veterans all over the country who are currently wearing a suit like this. I'm a Mount Everest climber, but this suit doesn't represent anything to do with that. It represents what I had to do overseas, the way it affected me, and the way it continues to affect me. Now, helping people with PTSD would be easy if they all wore a suit that was orange, but unfortunately they don't. So, but what we can do is realize that what they have underneath is just as important to recognize, because everybody underneath is a military veteran, and they all have this in common. This next part of what I have on is an honor to wear. What I'm taking off right now is a burden. Unfortunately, they often go together. I was in Afghanistan. I was attached to the team, and we went up in the mountains for 2 weeks, and we got into several exchanges of fire that involved us waking up in the middle of the day to AK-47 rounds hitting the ground around us. Now, you go home and try to sleep with that. Obviously, logically, you know that's not likely going to happen. However, your body and your psyche is not conditioned to understand the difference. And you relive that over and over and over. However, this part of me, as Staff Sergeant Nick Gibson, United States Air Force Reserve Pararescueman, PJ, this part of me is something that's very near and dear to my heart. However, again, if I were to walk around in Atlanta, walk around Emory, I wouldn't fit in like this. And it's difficult, because this is a part of me. This is a large part of me. Now, underneath that, I'm Nick Gibson, physician assistant student, soon to graduate. And this part of me is the way I dress now. However, this part of me is also a complete paradox of what this is. I fit in. Everybody can see me as a normal person. However, I'm trying to function in a normal world, and I'm tripping over all this stuff that's still on the ground that I've set there. And so my problem is I have to function like everyone else, but nobody else looks down to what's laying on the floor and what I have to navigate around just to function normally. So my problem is I'm in a world where I don't feel like I belong and nobody sees it. If I could wear these things, or if I had to wear these things, then people would recognize that. But what we have to look at is, as people who don't have to wear these types of things, how can we help them navigate around these? How can we help them to fit in with the world? How can we help them not to quit? So let's talk a little bit about what I did in the cause with climbing Mount Everest. So Mount Everest, for some of you who maybe aren't climbers or don't know, Sagarmatha is the name that was given to it by those who actually live in the area. Mount Everest was given to it by those of us who went and found it and said, it's ours. So it's on the border of Nepal and Tibet, 29,035 feet. First summit was May 29th, 1953 by Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. Neither will discuss who was the first to set foot on the mountain, and I think that's theirs to keep. Number of climbers, approximately the summit at about 3,600. So we started our journey. These are all pictures I took on the trip. This is Kathmandu, Nepal. It's an amazing place. Nepal is a wonderful country, very hospitable to us. However, they hold one of the world's great treasures in Mount Everest and the entire range there. This is Lukla Airport, commonly ranked the most dangerous airport in the world. For obvious reasons, there is nothing on the other side of that except for plane wreckage at the bottom of a deep ravine. So and unfortunately with people still inside that wreckage because it's just too treacherous terrain to get them out. So this, to me, was the scariest part of the entire trip. But it was a rush once we landed. We had to trek 50 miles in, and that's a challenge in itself. You're starting out at 10,000 feet, gaining to elevation of 16.5. So at that point, you're also battling the bugs that your body isn't used to. All of us got sick. We had the highest sick rate pretty much of all time. And some of us had to stay a little bit later in some of the other villages as we passed through just to recover and let our body recover. It took us about 10 days. Got into base camp. Well, here's one for some of the suspension bridges we have. These are prayer flags and the white silk scarves that we are given in a ceremony. And as these flap in the wind, you're supposed to put prayer flags up, and there are prayers written on them. These prayers are carried in the wind and then down into the rivers and the valleys and then flow out into the ocean. It's a very beautiful, beautiful concept. So here's Lukla Base Camp. It was one of the first places we climbed. Lukla is a 20,000-foot peak, and it saved us from going through the icefall one time, and we could still acclimate. These lights on here are the headlamps of people walking around the camp. This is about a 10-minute exposure. And if somebody walked towards the camera, you can see a silhouette of them, almost like a ghost appearing. So this is me and my Sherpa, Mingma Tenzing II, who is all of 20 years old, incredible climber. I was his 6th trip up Mount Everest at 20 years old. We participated in what was called the puja ceremony. And the puja essentially is to bless your equipment, to bless the climbers, and to ask the gods for grace and passage, safe passage up the mountain. We did it here. You can see it happening on the right, and we did it right there in front of the icefall of Mount Everest. And then you put the starch, the cornstarch, on the beard to signify growing old and living a long life and having many children. Which, as you can see, Mingma had a little beard. His wouldn't catch as well as mine. So here's Everest Base Camp, 17,500 feet. And this is one morning when I woke up and I found this shot of the sun coming in and melting the snow. Quickly, the sun wakes you up. You cannot stay in your tent. It gets up into the 80s at that point. You're roasting, so you have to get outside. And this was our home for about a month and a half. Oops. Here we are going through the icefall. I don't have many pictures with the icefall. It just wasn't a place to stop and take shots. As you can see, even Mingma took a shot up there of me coming up. And this is Mingma. You might recognize this from the front of Emory Magazine. As we're coming through, we've just gotten to safe territory. All those blocks in the upper left were letting go and covering us in snow and ice. Fortunately, we didn't lose anybody in our team in the icefall this year. This is Camp 1. In the background, you can see all of the snow coming down in a massive avalanche, which is why we positioned the camp where it is. At this point, you're pretty much exhausted, especially coming through the icefall, because you've had to move fast. And I mean moving fast, almost like trying to drive a car on the interstate in first gear. That's pretty much what you're looking at. So we're all exhausted and taking some rest and pressing on to Camp 2. Camp 2 is at 22,000 feet, and this is kind of the halfway point where we really stop and we can rest and spend several days. Many of you might have heard about the large Sherpa incident that happened with some famous climbers. This is where it happened here, and I'll not go into details on that. Everybody's got their different opinions about it. But this is looking back down into base camp as the sun's going down and cresting down over the horizon. So here's Camp 3. This is halfway up the Lhotse face. Unfortunately, about a week or two before this picture was taken, we lost a Sherpa at Camp 3. He woke up in the morning, said he wasn't feeling well, went to sleep. 45 minutes later, he was unresponsive and not breathing. I was the closest medical personnel, and I was still 2 hours away. And I could hear clients on the radio giving CPR. Unfortunately, we lost him. He was 35 years old. We're not sure what caused it, but it was a huge loss for the entire team. We all become a family up there, and Sherpa are incredible people. This is Camp 4. You can see over here are the cluster of tents. Gives you an idea. There's probably about 50, 60 tents over there, close to it. And this is basically where you come and you stay for maybe 12 hours, maybe 10 hours, and then you press on at 7 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night to go for the summit. So you climb from Camp 3, where you started your oxygen, up to here, Camp 4, and then you press on from there and into what they call the death zone. And the summit. I don't know, I wasn't there. So I made it within 800 feet and had to turn around. If somebody Googles it and shows me a picture, I would appreciate it. So we basically, we pressed on, and I got to a point where I was trapped behind some climbers that were climbing very slow. I started to lose my toes. I climbed for about 2 hours with numb toes, and then they started getting stiff. That was it. I made the decision I wasn't going to leave any of my digits on that mountain, and I didn't. This is me before coming into base camp. This is what I looked like as I was first arriving. You eat as much as you can on the way up, try to stay healthy, and then I took one of the only selfies of the trip as I just come down from my summit attempt. I made it to 28,200 feet, and all that ice is condensation from my oxygen mask that was dripping out onto my chest. At this point, I didn't know it yet, but I had a high-altitude pulmonary edema. I was getting fluid in my lungs. I was extremely exhausted. Now, around this time when I'm at this camp would probably be about the time I was on the summit, and I would have been experiencing the difficulties of pulmonary edema on the summit of Everest, and that's never a good thing, and there's a lot of people that have never made it back. And this is the team, the USAF 7 Summits Challenge team, and this was the final climb of all the 7 summits, and we did this climb to try to encourage people to get outdoors, get their heart rate up, and use that to help deal with what you've seen and what you've been through overseas, especially military members. Now, I want to send a message out real quick to the veterans out there who are watching this. I want you to know that you are going through something that not many people can understand. And what I want to encourage you to understand is that just because you come home doesn't mean you come back. So what we need to do is figure out a way to bring you back. And unfortunately, it's frustrating because you're in a world where nobody sees the clothes, nobody sees the suit, nobody sees the uniform. But you train for years in the military to operate as a team, to work as a team, and to all function together, and to execute things together, and you never rely on one person because everybody's going to have a bad day at some point. So what I want you to know is, why would you approach this any differently? Why would you take this experience and this fight that you're fighting, and why would you fight it alone? It makes no sense. So stop. All right? Go out, engage, talk to somebody, go see somebody, please. Secondly, to all of you out there, I want you to think of yourselves as Sherpa. You're helping these veterans climb these mountains that they have when they come home. And they need the support of people around them, people they know and trust and that care about them and love them. Okay? If I stepped on Mount Everest without a Sherpa, I wouldn't have got anywhere near where I got. We all need Sherpa in our lives. We all need somebody who's there, who's guiding us, who's helping us, who's engaging us, and challenging us to do the difficult things. And as a veteran, that may be just telling a story or talking about your experience. But for the rest of you, it gives you an opportunity to step up and really help, because we've got to come back together as a nation. We've got people coming home who all are dressed like me, who don't wear a uniform anymore. And as a military member, you're taught to keep your feelings inside, not to express them, because they could inhibit the mission. They could cloud your judgment, all right? But these feelings don't go away once you're home. So we've got to reach out to these guys and girls, and we've got to challenge them, and we've got to bring them back. Here's the Sherpa. We're sitting in the tent here. You can see my Sherpa just behind in the sunglasses. Very cheerful people, very wonderful, warm. As we were going for the summit, Mi'kmaq Tenzing 2, his sister suddenly lost her 5-month-old child. And it was very, very tragic. And I found out about it as I was going down. I was going to visit his home in Port Say, where most of the Sherpa are from, and pay my respects to his family. But, you know, I was distraught. I was destroyed. I was very upset about not making the summit, because you spend all this money and all this time and then 2 months at altitude. It takes 2 months to climb this mountain. And I was beating myself up. I was having a pity party. And then here's this person, this family member of my Sherpa, who has lost their child. Looks like just a dumb mountain after that. So that put things in perspective for me. and made me realize that tragedy is something you can define in a lot of different ways. So, in closing, I want you all to know that your job is a hard job now. For all those coming back, all of you out there who know a veteran, raise your hand if you know a veteran that's been over to Iraq and Afghanistan, or either, right? That's most of us. How many out there know a veteran that committed suicide? Too many hands, right? If you don't think we're not at war on our own soil, you're wrong. We're losing more people here than we are over there, and that's unacceptable. So I want to challenge you. I want you guys to reach out, step out of your comfort zones, okay? You watch football, think about this. Every football player on that team, both sides, both teams, that's the number of people, veterans, that commit suicide every day. It's insane. So I like to think of this picture as hope. This was a 30-minute exposure from base camp, the stars streaking, coming across the sky. And actually, it's not the stars. We all know that the Earth is actually rotating. The stars are sitting still. So, but I like to think they're streaking. And you can see some headlamps down here coming across. But it's something that you think about, the hope and the promise that we have as things wind down overseas for us. Maybe they spin back up with something else. Maybe they don't. But the point is, we've got wounds to lick here, and we've got people that need help, and we've got to be Sherpa for them, okay? So I want to challenge all of you that. I also want to say that everything I've done up to this point, everything I do now, everything that I'm saying today, and everything that happens because of this, it's dedicated to those men and women who have paid the ultimate price and given their lives for this country. We have a great country. I know everybody's upset about one thing or another, but we live in a wonderful place where we have the freedom to be upset. We have the freedom to discuss and talk about it. And those kinds of things have been paid for by members of our military and armed forces and by all of those who have sacrificed for our country. So I want to encourage you guys to, next time you're out and you're realizing that you're out and having fun, you look up at the sky, there's a moon up there. Somewhere out there, there's a military member looking up at that same moon who's doing this for all of us. I include myself. While I am a reservist, I'm also a civilian. And so I'm very, very honored to be a part of that, but very honored that they did what they did for me. So this is dedicated to them, and this is dedicated to all of those out there who are fighting wars within themselves. I want you to know that you are not alone. Thank you.
Leave it there. I'll get it a second. Fantastic.